You are listening to the evening show here on BBC Radio Wales with me, Alan Thompson. Joe Elliott from Def Leppard is my special guest on the programme tonight. Their first ever live album is coming out very soon. It's coming out at the start of June. It's called Mirrorball, and Joe is talking to me, obviously, on the programme tonight about this record and what it's like to be in one of the biggest bands of all time. Are you generally a fan of live albums? You mentioned a couple just before we heard them. And Live and Dangerous, I was watching a Lizzie documentary recently, and that's obviously considered to be a classic live album.
It is. It's the blueprint, pretty much. It's the one that's been accepted. I think there are better albums, in fairness. I mean, and I'm a huge Lizzie fan. But it's the one that's accepted as, like, if you're going to make a live album, it's got to be at least that good.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Rosalie was on that, wasn't it?
It was.
I love that version.
The way that they segue Cowboy Song into Boys Are Back in Town, it almost becomes one song.
Yeah.
You can't really split those two songs up anymore. As I mentioned earlier, the UFO live album, Stranger in the Night, is also spectacular.
Yeah.
Anybody that's a Kiss fan will tell you that the first two Kiss albums are better than any of their studio records, maybe except for Destroyer.
Yeah.
Frampton Comes Alive. If you ever listen to the studio version of Show Me the Way, you'll see how superior the live version is.
Yeah.
So I'm always a fan of a good live album.
And with Def Leppard, I mean, you mentioned earlier on, working with Mutt in the studio. Obviously, those records always sounded to me very complicated, and you obviously worked very hard on them. Is that difficult to replicate that live?
Very. It was in the early days. When we finished the Hysteria album, I remember thinking, good Lord, how the hell are we ever going to play Hysteria? On the album Hysteria, there are 11 different guitars.
What?
Yeah, on the one song, on the song Hysteria, there's 11 different guitar parts. That's because we were, when you're in a studio situation, take for example Bohemian Rhapsody.
Yeah.
When Fred walks into a room and goes, "I've got this idea for a song," it's pretty obvious that there's nothing that could ever be played live as it is on the record. The whole middle section is all Fred's voice mostly, except for a few Galileos by Roger, and you'd need 100 people on stage to pull it off. But why should you limit your artistic kind of abilities just because the recording session suggests that if you can't play it live, you shouldn't record it?
Of course.
I think that's ridiculous. Technology brought a lot of great artistic statements out in the 80s. I mean, I honestly think bands like the Pet Shop Boys and the Human League, and maybe even Ultravox, and bands that were very electronica wouldn't have existed without technology as their third hand, if you like.
Yeah, I mean, do you think that's a bad thing? Because, I mean, often I think technology can get in the way of basically what you certainly have always had with Def Leppard, which, frankly, is just great songs.
Yeah, it can, if you let it, but we didn't let it. What we liked to think we did was, I remember us sitting around in Dublin in '84 with Mutt Lang when we were coming up with the songs for Hysteria and listening what seemed to be every week to Frankie Goes to Hollywood.
Yeah.
On Top of the Pops doing either Two Tribes or, Welcome to the Pleasure Dome or Relax. And thinking, as much as it wasn't rock in the sense of rock, it was so fantastically produced by Trevor Horn that it's like there were elements of that we wanted to try and steal and put in so we didn't just sound like your average standard rock band. And that was what I think shoved us further out there and sometimes polarized the audience. Some people wanted us to sound more like Status Quo or Saxon. We didn't. We wanted to be more Queen for the harmonies and the intricate arrangements and production, and AC/DC for the power.
Yeah.
That was our kind of hybrid two bands that we'd wanted to be in, but at the same time we were listening to Kate Bush, we were listening to Peter Gabriel, all the people that were using clever productions, or U2 with Eno, all the things that they would do to enhance a regular three-chord song and take it to somewhere that was a bit more than what the Kinks were 15 years earlier.
And did he push your songwriting really hard, Mutt Lange?
Absolutely.
His reputation for being in studio is being, he pushes his bands that he works with.
Yeah, you're like students when you work with Mutt. He's not just going to sit there and interpret what you say. He's going to make you sing it better than you would under your own steam. He's going to push you to make sure that the lyrics match the music. And they don't always have to be great. I mean, look, there's a lot of people out there that'll go, how can you be even discussing good lyrics when you've written a song called Let's Get Rocked, I suppose a rock's out of question. But as mad as it is, it became a front of a T-shirt, it became a joke thing that people say in pubs, and it's like, well, then it worked. It actually doesn't, just because it's not William Shakespeare, doesn't mean that it didn't work. It can be the Goons, it doesn't matter.
Yeah.
It's a case of, like, if it resonates, I would much rather be in a band that is black and white, as in other words, half the audience think you're horrible, the other half think you're the best thing in the world, rather than this grey area where people going, yeah, they're all right.
They don't care.
You know, it's like, it's much better to have that. It's like Guns N' Roses. There are people that worship Axl, and there are people that hate him.
Yeah.
There's not many people that are in between.
Well,
It's a
James
good place to be.
James Dean said, "I rather the audience booed than yawned." You know, it's like
I couldn't agree more.
It's a more positive reaction.
It's a fun, yeah, absolutely. And I think it's just an artistic. It's just the mantra of any artist, I'd imagine, is that you just want to be noticed. And if somebody hates you,
Yeah.
you must be doing something right.
So when you're working with Mutt Lange, I'm always curious to know the relationship between songwriters, artists, and producers. You must have to trust each other, because if you're coming up with a lyric or you're doing a vocal and he says, that's terrible, redo it, I would imagine that could create tension in the studio.
Absolutely, but in fairness, he's never said that to us. And if he had,
Yeah.
he wouldn't have said it like that.
No.
He would normally let you try it out and see if it, you know, if it kind of, you woke up the next day going, I'm not really sure about that bit.
Yeah.
So he was very good when it came to that, you know, and it was the same thing. If he suggested something, I'd look at him and go, you got to be kidding me. You know, it's like, well, give it a go first, and then you go, no, it's not working for me. I don't feel right. It's making me feel weird.
Didn't he do a Boomtown Rats album?
He did 4 Boomtown Rats
Did he
albums.
really? That's where I know the guy's
Mutt
name.
Lange did XTC. Even though it was only a couple of B-sides, he worked with a band called Supercharge, who had this big, fat, bald guy called Albie Donnelly on vocals, and they were like a kind of a jazz rock comedy group.
Yeah.
He worked with the Motors.
Oh, yeah, Forget About You.
Yeah.
Airport.
Before that, it was the album before that, a great song called Dancing the Night Away.
Yeah.
He worked with a band called The Records. And then he got his big break, was at Highway to Hell, AC/DC.
Right.
We were trying to get him before he even did Highway to Hell. We wanted Mutt to do our first album, but he wasn't available. But he did see us open for AC/DC on the Highway to Hell tour, because our manager managed AC/DC too, and he made Mutt watch us, and that was where the relationship started. He said, I like them. There's a bit of work to be done, but I like them. And so he did our second album, third, fourth, and kind of the fifth one as well.
The single that first brought your attention to me, certainly while I was busy listening to the Style Council and the Smiths in 1984, was Photograph.
Right.
I'm going to play the live version of that now.
Awesome.
Now that song, in fact, let's play the live version, then we'll talk more after that. This is a live version of Photograph. Love this tune from Def Leppard's live album Mirrorball, and more from Joe Elliott right after this.